Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye. Today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 8, the Cosmic Manifestation, and today's text is number 6. Dautatma Purusha Krishna Paramulam Namunchati Paramulam Namunchati Muktasarva Pariklesha Panta Swasharanam Yata. Dauta Atma, whose heart has been cleansed. Purusha, the living being. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Padamulam, the shelter of the lotus feet. Na, never. Munchiti, gives up. Mukta, liberated. Sarva, all. Pariklesha, of all miseries of life. Panta, the traveler. Swasharanam, in his own abode. Yata, as it were. A pure devotee of the Lord, whose heart has once been cleansed by the process of devotional service, never relinquishes the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, for they fully satisfy him, as a traveler is satisfied at home after a troubled journey. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki. One who is not a pure devotee of the Supreme Lord is not completely cleansed in the heart, but a perfectly cleansed person never quits the devotional service of the Lord. In discharging such devotional service as ordered by Brahmaji to Narada in the preaching of Srimad Bhagavatam. Sometimes a representative of the Lord engaged in preaching work meets various so-called difficulties. This was exhibited by Lord Nityananda when he delivered the two fallen souls, Jagai and Madai, and similarly Lord Jesus Christ was crucified by the non-believers. But such difficulties are very gladly suffered by the devotees in preaching, because in such activities, although apparently very severe, the devotees of the Lord felt transcendental pleasure because the Lord is satisfied. Prahlad Maharaj suffered greatly, but still he never forgot the lotus feet of the Lord. This is because a pure devotee of the Lord is so purified in his heart that he cannot leave the shelter of Lord Krishna in any circumstances. There is no self-interest in such sacrifice. The progress of cultivating knowledge by the jñānīs or the bodily gymnastics of by the yogis are ultimately given up by the respective performers. But a devotee of the Lord cannot give up the service of the Lord, for he is ordered by his spiritual master. Pure devotees like Narada and Nityananda Prabhu make up the order of the spiritual master as the sustenance of life. Take up. Pure devotees like Narada and Nityananda Prabhu take up the order of the spiritual master as the sustenance of life. They do not mind what becomes of the future of their lives. They take the matter very seriously, as the order comes from the higher authority, from the representative of the Lord, or from the Lord himself. The example set herein is very appropriate. A traveler leaves home to search for wealth in far distant places, sometimes in the forest and sometimes in the ocean, and sometimes on hilltops. Certainly, there are many troubles for the traveler when he is in such unknown places, but all such troubles are at once mitigated as soon as the sense of his family affection is remembered, and as soon as he returns home, he forgets all such troubles on the way. A pure devotee of the Lord is exactly in a family tie with the Lord, and therefore he is undeterred in discharging his duty in full affection, in a full affectionate tie with the Lord. For my respectful obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to the previous ācāryas, and to all the assembled devotees. Vanchakopdarubhascha kripasindabheva chapatitanam pavanibhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So we needn't be disappointed in the discharge of devotional service, because even missteps become beneficial to us. And Krishna advises us in the Bhagavad Gītā that we shouldn't be dependent on the ordinary course of activities. Of course, whatever we consider ordinary will change, and then we'll think, oh, why did that happen? It's supposed to be this way. And that's why Krishna mentions that a devotee shouldn't be attached to any particular way of doing things. One should be attached to doing one's service. If one has to adjust to the situation based on one's service, there's no harm and there's no fault. Whereas in the material world, we can understand that there's always faults in everything. Krishna himself certifies this in the Bhagavad Gītā in several ways. One way is he categorically says the material world is a difficult place. So that's good to know. He says, Brahma bhuvana loka punar avartino rjuna mamopetya tukonteya punar janma nividite. That's a sweeping non-endorsement of the material world as a place for finding happiness, because he mentions from the topmost down to the lowest planets, all are places of misery. It's a dukkhalayam, it's a place of suffering. So best to adjust one's expectations. If you have high expectations that I can find some resting place here in this world, then you'll be disappointed for sure. And then Krishna also says in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gītā that every endeavor has some sort of fault, just as fire has smoke. Well, fire is necessary and it's very important for human society, but it has smoke, so that's a fault. And that metaphor relates to all the ways in which we may try to do our duty in life. Thank you, sir. Hare Krishna. That although we may have the best of intentions and we may try to do our duty, still something might be wrong. Also, we may find that we meet with opposition even in circumstances where we feel probably in an unwarranted way that we won't have any opposition. For instance, we may think, well, I'm among spiritual people, therefore there'll be no arguments. Ha ha. Human beings in general like to argue. Why is that? It's because we're individuals. We have the same tendencies as Krishna to be independently minded. We are little sparks of the Supreme, so we have the same quality as Krishna. And we can get it into our heads to do any number of things. And it may look like we can go ahead and just do them. I saw a little girl once when I was walking on Burlingame Avenue near our house. Take a walk up that street fairly regularly, see what's going on up there. And I saw this man walking down the street with his little daughter. She was a toddler. She was clopping along with some sandals on, and she was running ahead of him. And myself and another pedestrian came around the corner just in time to see this scene with the father running behind his daughter. Not in angst, but he had a bemused look on his face. And he looked at both of us pedestrians who were observing the situation, and he said, "She thinks she's independent." That's all he said as we walked past. And I thought about it as I walked up the street. She can't make a phone call. She can't drive a car. Without her father, she's lost. But she thinks she's independent, little girl, clopping along. And she's trying to shake her father, actually. It's like, "Get out of here. Let me go." It's like, "Sure." Where are you going to go anyway? And Krishna's like that with us also. That I'm thinking, let me take off, and Krishna, why are you following me everywhere? I want to do whatever I want to do. What's more, even in the highest minded assemblies of human beings, there's always differences of opinion. Just look at all the various philosophical presentations given through the Indian systems. One talks about Sankhya. No, you have to count all the elements because it's the elements interacting with one another that actually creates life and makes all the variety in the world. Another one will say, no, you have to press your nose. If you don't press your nose, you're nobody. On and on, human beings come up with various philosophical systems, and even within the same organization, that is, within a organized system of philosophy or religion, there are varieties. I look at the Christian world. Christianity, you say, is one thing. When I was in Texas, and one of our devotees is from a long line of Christians in the Baptist religion, and her husband is a pastor in a big church, so she became a devotee. I mean, how disconcerting might that be for somebody? That happens. And I was talking to him as we were driving somewhere and asking about the varieties of Christianity. As for instance, there's the Joel Osteen church of all you have to do is pray hard enough and God will give you everything. If you don't have everything you want, you're just not praying hard enough. And then there's the Turn or Burn group that we see on Venice Boulevard. Y'all's going to hell, etc., etc. There are so many different varieties of Christian churches. It's not just one thing. And even within one church, people have a difference of opinion. That, oh no, you're supposed to step on that side, not on this side. And you did it wrong. Devotees, especially those who are, what do we call, prakrita bhaktas, those who are in the beginning stages and have a materialistic conception of what devotional service is, are attached to, specifically attached to the details, the rules and regulations of how you're supposed to do things. However, my point is that this is to be expected. There's not some way in which you can suddenly unite everybody with the same idea. Well, you can, but still, even within that united front, there are going to be differences. That's why Prabhupada, after watching the Gaudiya Math go through various changes, when he started his own organization, he invited us to come to India every year, and he said, discuss unity and diversity. How are you going to work together despite the fact that you're all from different cultures, and even within the same culture, you have a sense of competition between one another. This all goes to say that we, in the discharge of our devotional service, needn't be upset by these differences. In fact, a godbrother of mine named Maitreya Rishi Prabhu, he's from Iran. He was a good manager, and he was a very nice devotee. In fact, he was the GBC in San Francisco for a while, and there were several restaurants going at the same time during his reign, and devotees seemed pretty happy. He had written to Prabhupada bemoaning the fact that the leaders were arguing with one another. And his point of view was, well, it's a spiritual organization. There should be no arguing to speak of difference of opinion. There's only one idea. Well, this is true to some degree. Prabhupada wrote back and said, don't look for utopia. Utopia means a place that doesn't exist, where everything's perfect, where there are no difficulties. And then he went on to say, not just in the material world, but also in the spiritual world. He said there are anomalies. What are you going to do about that? Of course, he said things like, well, sometimes Krishna accidentally milks a bull rather than a cow. because he's so bewildered after seeing Srimati Radharani. He mixes up the two. And he said sometimes the gopis don't dress properly because they're in such a rush to go see Krishna. They'll put their ornaments on the wrong ear or something's amiss. And he said, what are you going to do, complain? This is the nature of the world. And then, of course, we get into the realm of organizing the systems of religion. Like here we have a gigantic temple that is revered and millions of people visit every year. And then there's some system that is hard to understand. It doesn't correlate with the Bhagavad Gītā necessarily about who can walk in and who can't. This is to be expected. These things happen in the ways that people try to organize a religious system when there's people involved. See, that's the problem. When there's people involved, you're going to have some differences of opinion, and oftentimes ideas that are not well thought out get calcified over time, because every living entity has a little chip in the game here in this world, and when one gets into a spiritual or religious organization, one may also have a little chip in the game. This, throughout history, has been a problem because, as the sociologist and philosopher Michel once said, that they're the iron laws of oligarchy. And in the iron laws of oligarchy, according to Michel, as soon as one gets a little power somewhere, then instead of doing one's duty exactly the way one should, one tries to consolidate the power and keep it. And we spend the preponderance of our energy holding that. Religious history shows so much how the reformers, after reforming what was an oppressive system, top-down system, of course there is a top-down system because Krishna's on the top and we're not. And of course, that has to be there to some degree, but it has to be properly aligned. But oftentimes reformers, after reforming, then a little later on, they also become overly oppressive and restrictive as far as letting things go the way they need to go, to let everybody come in to the process. Why does that happen? Because that's the way it is. And if you start saying, like, why are things this way? It shouldn't be that way. This is not what Krishna says. He says work around it. And of course, we find that during the time of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there were all kinds of restrictive measures by the society at the time. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu worked around them to the point he embraced him, and Ramananda Roy embraced him. It was an unsightly, it sounds redundant, an unsightly scene. Many of the people nearby who were, they were bureaucrats, and they thought, why is this sannyasi embracing a politician? And they thought this is wrong. And when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu noticed that they were upset by it, he stopped. Now he could have said, you guys don't know what you're talking about. And he could have made a public, many times he said, no, the government, even though they may have some oppressive ideas, that they're representatives of God. Otherwise, how did they get in power like that? My point is that there always has been a religion has some and who not to let in. Based on what? On your arbitrary decision? Or is it based on a higher spiritual principle? Well, oftentimes, as I've already said ad nauseum in this class, this is the case in the material world, that people get a wrong-headed idea, it gets institutionalized, and then what are you going to do? Well, and do what Haridas Thakur did. He worked around it. Do what Sanatana Goswami did. He worked around it. Do what Rupa Goswami did. He worked around it. And, I mean, there's a story that Madhavananda Prabhu tells here. It's a well-known story here in Purī about, what's his name? Taki Khan? He was the king. And he got a... No, he wasn't the king. Chaitanya Dev, I think, was the name of the king. And then there was... Rajadev. Anyway, let's call him Rajadev for now until I remember what his real name is. There was an attack by Taki Khan, a Muslim ruler. And although they put up a good fight, Purī was lost to Taki Khan and his forces. And they arrested the temple. He became a Muslim. At that time, it wasn't so hard. All he had to say is, I'm a Muslim, and put on the clothes, and he married a Muslim wife. His intention was to save the temple. When he went back home, everyone rejected him. Of course, his wives weren't thrilled when he showed up at the door with a Muslim outfit on and a new wife. She was Muslim. And all the people rejected him. And then they wouldn't let him in the temple. The Pandits said, no, you can't come in. You're not allowed. And Taki Khan, and what am I calling him? Rajadev. My apologies for giving you the wrong name. Ramachandra Dev, thank you very much. Ramachandra Dev then felt decimated, well, let's get the right word here. He felt, oh, I'm open to all options. Give me a word. He was, no, depressed isn't strong enough. Noticed that there was a trail of flowers coming from the temple to a particular place in the marketplace that was empty at night. And the head pujari had a dream where Jagannath complained, and he said, how are you treating my devotee like this, not respecting him? And when the pujari had this dream, he had a revelation, and he got together all of the pandas and everything. And they made a special deity just for this devotee. And to respect the fact that people would have been outraged for him coming in the temple, they put it on the outside so he could come there and have darshan every day. So there's a way in which we can't expect that things are going to go... Here's the understatement of the universe. Are you ready? We can't expect that everything's going to go our way. And in the Bhagavad Gītā, Krishna gives a solace. He says, a devotee isn't dependent on the ordinary course of activities. We just take whatever happens as some lesson that Krishna's giving us. And we adapt to that, and we'll see that actually tarejati tanaijati tadure tadvantike tarantarasya sarvasya taru sarvasya sibayata. The Shruti says that Krishna's right next to us all the time. So if you go down to Loi Bazaar, right, and you drive down the street in a rickshaw, possible? You may need an adjustment afterwards, but possible. And you may see many murtis in the windows there, right? Do you get down from your rickshaw and offer obeisances every place? Do you go in those shops and offer arti? Work with me, people. How about a picture? Every picture you see of Krishna, do you offer your obeisances? Well, why not? Gotcha! Someone might say because the deity's not installed, but what does that mean, actually? What does it really mean? When our intention is to serve Krishna, Krishna will come to see us. When we're ready to serve Krishna in any circumstances, whatever they may be, whether he kicks us out or whether, we're on the front row and we get in And then we may be looking at Krishna and we may be thinking, I'm so lucky, and look at all those lowlifes out there. They can't get in, but only I can. You know, someone might get in Tirupati, I got the prime ticket, or whatever it's called. You know, I got the super duper ticket, and I'm way ahead of these other losers back here. What kind of devotion is that? On the other hand, you have Haridas Thakur. He wouldn't go in anywhere. Outside, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked where he was. They said he's in the street offering his obeisances. He didn't get up. Until Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked him to get up, he stayed there. Who is closer? And who is the closest to Krishna? So devotional service is not something that can be stopped by any institution. Institutions at the same time are necessary because they make it possible for millions of people to come. The kinds of people that come to temples are pious. Krishna says, catur-vidhā bhajante mam, janāḥ su-kṛtino rjuna, ārto jijñāsur arthārthī jñānī cha bharatarṣabha. He names the motives of many different kinds of people. Everyone still okay? And he says they're all pious souls. But of all of them, the best ones are the ones that are in knowledge of the absolute truth and they just want to worship me. So that's the line we're in. And you can see how all of our ācāryas dealt with the institutionalization of religion. Even within our own ISKCON society, we may become frustrated. Why did this happen? Why did that happen? And the answer is, stuff happens. It really does. Stuff always happens. And we have to follow what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gītā to adapt to it. And then we'll live our lives with practicing pure devotional service unabated, because we're always close to Krishna when we have the determination to serve him in all circumstances. Whatever comes, I'll serve you, is our mood. Om Tat Sat. Now we have 23 seconds for any reflections or questions. And they better be good. Yes?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I had a question on one of the points you brought up about working around problems. But we also see in like the Chaitanya Charitamrita how when the Jankazi incident happened, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually challenged Jankazi, and all the devotees went and talked to Jankazi, and they made a big deal out of the policies that he wanted between working around problems. And
one of the ways that you can balance is when Lord Chaitanya shows up and tells you to light torches and come with him. We find in the Bhagavatam other circumstances in which Krishna himself tells people like the Devas, whose realm of heaven had been usurped by the demons, and that's not a good thing, that you'll have to wait and actually make an armistice with the demons. That's why they churn the milk ocean. There's not always one answer. People who have only one answer to everything are called fanatics. That there's only one way to look at this, and there's an ultimatum tied to it. And yes, there are times to assert oneself and to put one. So we have to use our intelligence and see, is this one of those times? Is it the will of Krishna? Does it have the endorsement of people that I trust and so forth? And if so, then that's okay too. I'm not advocating that we become doormats in all circumstances or neglect the proper upkeep of an institution, or that we even protest against a particular aspect of an institution. But keep in mind at the same time that, first of all, you can't fight City Hall. And then you can also become so absorbed in such things that you might forget your own devotional service and your own practice. So I guess the simple answer is that, it's a case-by-case basis. Prabhupada Priya, you have 2 seconds.
Hare Krishna. I didn't quite understand the point you were making with raising the question of, do we pay obeisances and worship every picture, every murti that we see? Can you please explain?
Well, Havi-yogendra, various levels of perception of the Lord, and the way that the people who have those levels of perception conduct themselves. Acharyam eva haraye pujam ya sharayayate natad bhakteshu chanyeshu sabhakta prakrita smitaha. First, not first, actually he mentions the Mahabhagavata first, but I'm going the opposite direction. He mentions the prakrita bhakta, and he says, Prakrita Bhakta sees that God's only in the temple. And then another characteristic is that person doesn't know how to show respect to devotees, and also doesn't know how to do good for others. Is only focused that God's in one place in the temple. And Prabhupada made this point about Arya Samaj, who was saying, you can't go to God in the temple. And he said, well, you say he's everywhere and he's all pervading, so why isn't he also in the temple? My point in saying that is that we should have a sense that even if we can't get in the temple to see Lord Jagannath, that Lord Jagannath is not unavailable to us. In fact, that's why I told that story. He may be more available to someone who's forlorn, who wasn't able to see him. And then, in the pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we have Vasudeva the leper. He was far away from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he was in Kurmashetra. And he got word, did Vasudeva, who was suffering from leprosy. And he hurried to come there to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but Mahaprabhu had already left. But when Mahaprabhu, who's omniscient, understood the eagerness of his devotee to see him, he came back. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Krishna, can circle back for us anytime, wherever we may be. And so my point was that it's based on our own internal understanding. Prahlad Maharaj saw Krishna in a pillar. Do we worship a pillar? We don't, because, I don't, because I don't see him in the pillar. But Prahlad did. So just worship anywhere. What Prakrita Bhakta doesn't understand and only sees Krishna in a localized place. And it's not considered the most advanced level of devotional service. Yes. Okay, but the offering's still being made, no? Okay, so it's finished. We have to stop now. I thank everybody for your kind attention. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Shri Panchatattva, Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan, Srimad Mahaprabhu, Shri Purī Dham, Shri Holy Name, Harinam Prabhu, and all the great ācāryas. If you so desire, please direct us to always stay in your favor by reacting to whatever happens to us in this world in a way that's in accordance to your teachings in the Bhagavad Gītā and the Srimad Bhagavatam, and as exemplified by the great ācāryas. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone who agrees with this prayer in whole or in part, please unmute and say Hare Krishna. Vanchakalpadrishya Kripasindabe Vajapatitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnave Namo Namaha